Amazing has joined the 100 Thieves roster in replacement of Onda in the jungle, and then as well too, Huhi is now out of the roster, and Soligo, their academy mid laner, has moved up into the starting position for the mid lane. And so I want to concentrate on Amazing because I think this is one of the pieces to the puzzle that 100 Thieves has been looking for. And Amazing hasn't actually played for an entire split, right? The last time that he played was during 2018, where he played on Schalke, and he coincidentally was the coach for the academy team for Schalke. But during 2018, he was on Schalke and they made it to the summer finals, right? And this was like a big accomplishment. Schalke just came out of nowhere, essentially. But they would lose against Fnatic in pretty convincing fashion during the finals. And then they would get shuffled down, of course, to the regional finals, which they would then lose to G2, of course, because as you know, G2 made it over into Worlds with their bans against Heimerdinger and everything, and everyone had to be worried against that with Wadid and Hjarnan in the bot lane. So Amazing as a jungler. Historically, he's previously been known as a aggressive jungler, actually, and most junglers actually initially when they get picked up, they essentially are like solo queue talent and like mechanical talent players. And so with champions like Lee Sin and Elise, he shined on like pretty heavily, but then he slowly tapered off into the control style junglers that we see today from him, like Sejuani or Gragas, and then Rek'Sai previously. And if you remember Rek'Sai back in the day, this was when she was essentially just a farming jungler, and the ult would teleport her to one of her tunnels to continue farming, and hence why there's the joke, the farm alarm, which signified that, well, okay, Rek'Sai's ult is going off, but it doesn't even fucking matter, right? She's not going to go and kill anyone. So 2018, this is when his champion pool was kind of criticized once again, because Amazing's champion pool has been criticized basically throughout his entire career. But he had picks like Trundle and Sejuani and Gragas, but his champion pool was still largely criticized because that's mostly a tank champion pool. So this wasn't his biggest strength, and actually his biggest strength and what he brought to Schalke themselves was an amazing leader, right? Like it was, well, I mean, a great leader, I guess we'll say. I guess we can't use the fucking noun amazing anymore, but is that his main strength is being a leader, and this may also allude to why Schalke was the second best team when behind at 15 minutes, which is a pretty cool stat. I think they were like 9-9 or something when it came to being behind at 15 minutes, which is pretty impressive. So when joining 100 Thieves, he should bring a pretty strong presence when it comes to early game shot calling, because that's generally what a jungler is responsible for, right? They have the greatest eye on the map in terms of looking at all the lanes and dictating which lanes get help and which lanes don't. So this should be a good piece for 100 Thieves to work with, because that was one of the biggest criticisms for Onda, right? Was that he really didn't have a game plan for the early parts of the game. And so essentially he would just be kind of dragged around this way or that way and not have a definitive answer as to what he wanted to do. So with Amazing, you're going to have someone that's a little more affirmative, someone that actually has some veterancy to fight back and say, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do this, and this is why, like, trust me on this. So I think with him joining 100 Thieves, this is going to be one of the benefits that they should reap. And he also, on his time during with Schalke, he had a tendency to play towards the top side heavily with Vizicachi, and then mid-secondary with Nuke Duck. And if you notice the pattern, at least within the playoffs, he would often gank top first and then get Vizicachi ahead, and then he would help out mid lane. And once he ganked mid, once, Nukeduck would often get ahead because he's just so fucking good. Not only that, but Nukeduck's champion pool was so huge that he could often get counter picks and just play into very favorable matchups no matter what. So it didn't really matter. But one big problem that you can foresee with Amazing still could be his champion pool, right? And I'm not saying that he didn't get better with his champion pool, because clearly he did in the playoffs with Schalke, where he brought out, Skarner and also Jarvan, right? So those were two things that no one really expected from him. And so, that was cool for him to show off a little bit of expansion of his pool. But when you have someone like Nukeduck that is willing to, or capable, I guess you could say, of just morphing into whatever mid laner that they need, then it takes less of a burden off of Amazing himself too. And not only that, but when you can't ban out Nukeduck at all, that's when you ended up seeing Amazing getting target banned, right? And he would go on maybe his 4th champion or his 5th champion. And so it ended up exposing that Amazing really couldn't perform that well on champions like Olaf, for instance, or Zac. So this shows that he doesn't have that deep of a champion pool if you actually target ban him. So this could be one aspect which arises from, Amazing's play on 100 Thieves, especially with playing with a player like Saligo, which is obviously not as strong as Nukeduck because he is a newer player and no one should expect that from him. But not only that, with the kind of play style that he had played within Schalke, where it was basically they played in a 2-3 format or a 1-3-1, where since Amazing would often go on tanks or bruisers, he could protect his ADC, which his ADC upset would often go for a scaling pick, and then they would rely on his capability for late game team fights to kind of win out the rest of the game. So when you have Amazing on this team, now he can't rely on the split push from Nukeduck, which would often amount to them winning the game, or Vizicachi being a strong presence in a side lane as well too, or even the 2-3 where Nukeduck would help Vizicachi over in a side lane and they just couldn't deal with both of that combo, right? Especially with Nukeduck on Rise. So with 100 Thieves, you aren't really going to have that much of a capability when it comes to your split push decisions, right? And yeah, maybe Amazing will be able to enable someday. I think that's probably the most exciting part, is that he could enable someday to become this monster that we know someday is capable of being. So I think that's very exciting, for a prospect. But with the kind of gaping hole that is the mid lane with this newer mid laner, we don't really know if they're going to be able to function in a split push style when you have someone who might not be able to kind of put pressure on another part of the map with a 1-3-1, or even hold his own when it comes to a 1-4 with the rest of the team. So I think 100 Thieves will be in playoffs. I don't think that's too much to ask from this squad, especially with, the biggest thing which Amazing gives, which is shot calling for the early game. But I don't think this will solve all of their problems, because obviously they have a problem in the mid lane. And then also, who's to say if Aphromoo actually comes back to form? I don't think that there's going to be too many problems with Aphromoo, because he's already had time to gel with Bang. And I think Bang played a different style than he was normally used to. He was normally used to a more aggressive ADC with a player like Double Lift or even Cody's son or Stixay, and whereas Bang is playing this more Korean ADC style. So I think 100 Thieves should shape up to be a pretty good team, at least in playoffs without a doubt, but to go further, I think they're going to need a little bit more from both their bot lane and their mid laner in order to actually succeed into fighting anything close to semifinals.